achieved.
Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this edition of the show, we're going to be taking a look at UFC on Effects Maynard versus Guida, which goes down June 22nd, 2012 from the Revel Casino in Atlantic City, New Jersey. I will be breaking down all 12 fights from the opening fight of the night to the main event, which should be a fantastic card, giving my predictions here on this show. Now, interestingly enough, UFC on Effects goes down on Friday night, which is the 22nd. The 23rd, the Saturday night, UFC 147, so back-to-back UFC events. Should be a great night. Now, how this works out with my betting packs, I had talked about increasing the price, and considering that I originally charged $5 for simply parlays, and then did fight-by-fight breakdowns. I've added a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm still only charging $5. So I've kept it cheap for a long time, but I do a lot of work. I put a lot of hours into what I do, and I'm going to increase the price to $10. What I'm going to do for this event is I'm going to include, of course, everything I do for UFC on Effects, plus my UFC 147 bet pack as well. I'm not doing a ton of fights at that event because they're close together. So I'm going to break down, obviously, the main event, co-main event, a couple other fights. Now, Joe Caporelli and Joel Richer are going to do predictions for the rest of the fights on that card, and they'll be posted on the website. But the bet pack will include some of the 147 picks I do and all of UFC on Effect. So please check that out at kamikazeoverdrive.net. As always, thank you very much to my sponsors, MMABettingOdds.com, Couchfighter.co, MMACrips.com, and just about anybody else that hosts and posts my videos. Thank you as always. Yes, kamikazeoverdrive.net as well. My site, you can check it out. I keep plugging it, but it's necessary. And I did a Sporkle. It's a cool little website that allows you to do tests, and I'm challenging you guys to go in and see if you can name off the top of your head the 20 main event winners from the last 20 events. And I've also put a forum together, and hopefully people will start signing up at the forum and, talk about MMA betting, etc. So we'll see if, please sign up at the forum. That would be greatly appreciated. I look forward to seeing all of you there. That's enough from me. I think we've covered enough of this. Let's get to the first prediction of the night.
In the opening fight of the night, we're in the UFC Bantamweight division as 10-3-0 Ken Stone takes on 8-2-0 Francisco Rivera. I'm going to keep this one quick. Coming into this fight, Rivera's coming off a decision win over Alex Soto, which was impressive, while Ken Stone also defeated Donnie Walker by submission back at UFC Fight Night Shields versus Ellenberger. And I believe Francisco Rivera is taking this fight on short notice. And the way I look at this is Rivera has significant power. He's won 5 of his 8 wins by knockout. Now, Stone is a wrestler by trade, and he's going to need to use his wrestling to control Rivera, keep him on the mat, and limit the striking exchanges. And Rivera has had issues in the past with being taken down. Now, Rivera's striking edge in this fight and his power is going to be the key. Stone has been knocked out on a couple of occasions. He got knocked out, I believe, by taking a quick look at his record. He got knocked out by Eric Koch in... No, wait, sorry. He got knocked out by Eddie Wineland in his final WEC appearance, and then his UFC debut, he got stopped by Scott Jorgensen, and he got stopped by punches from within the guard, which is a kind of a concern. I think there's some chin issues with Ken Stone. Combine that with Francisco Rivera's power, and I'm going to take Francisco Rivera to defeat Ken Stone by KO. Our next fight's in the UFC welterweight division as longtime UFC veteran Dan Miller makes his UFC welterweight debut. He's 13-6-0 with 1 no contest coming onto this. He takes on Ricardo Funch, who's 8-3-0. Quickly taking a look, Miller's lost 2 fights in a row. Funch has lost 1 since returning to the UFC, and 3 of his last 4. And, I look at this, Miller's making his debut in the divisions, and I think this is a step down in competition. Take nothing away from Funch, but you look at the guys Miller's face, guys like Son and Paul Harris, Marquardt, Bisping, Maia, and I think Miller is more than capable of handling his own in this fight. One interesting thing with Dan Miller, he's never been stopped in his career. He comes in as a BJJ black belt, I believe. Ricardo Funch is a black belt as well. The interesting with Funch, he's only won 1 fight by submission, 4 wins by knockout. Looking quickly at Funch's resume, he has had issues with ground-based fighters. Mike Pyle hurt him badly in that last fight. I don't even know how often. They only spent 1:22 in that entire fight there. But Claude Patrick was able to submit him after grinding him out on the ground. And Johnny Hendricks wrestle-humped him across the mat for the full duration of 3 rounds. So I think we're going to see a little bit more of that. I really like Dan Miller. I'm curious to see how he's going to fare at welterweight. And in this matchup, I'm going to take Dan Miller to defeat Ricardo Funch by decision. Remaining in the welterweight division, Matthew Mortal Brown, 16-11-0, battles Luis Ramos, 19-7. Now, Brown's taking this fight on short notice. I like Matt Brown. He seems to be the type of fighter who steps up and will take on anybody as long as, they're ready to fight. Matt Brown is there to fight. Now, looking at some of the numbers, one thing Brown's going to have, standing 6 feet tall, he's going to have a 4-inch height advantage, accompanied by a 4-inch reach advantage, which should be interesting, but I think Matt Brown would be best not to allow this fight to remain at distance. Luis Ramos is a decent striker. In his debut, he got shut down by Eric Silva after only 40 seconds. We didn't get to see a lot of him, but of some of the footage I've seen, he has the ability to hold his own on the feet with striking. Brown needs to fight this matchup in the clinch, grind out Ramos. Now, he needs to be careful because Brown has been submitted 9 times in his career. He's had major issues there. Ramos has 4 wins by submission. But I think the difference is going to be is Brown's gritty style and his size really wearing down the smaller opponent. Brown has some conditioning issues, but he's still against Stephen Thompson in his last win, which I picked the upset there, Brown over Thompson. He grinded that fight out. I think he'll be able to do the same thing here, avoid the knockout. He should, he'll be very careful against Luis Ramos on the mat. And I'm going to take Matt Brown to grind down Luis Ramos and pick up a victory by decision, giving the gritty veteran 3 straight wins. Now we move up to the 185-pound division as Nick Catone, 9-2, will take on Chris Camozzi, 16-5-0. Taking a look at Catone, he's on a 2-fight winning streak, but he hasn't fought since March 19th, 2011, so he's been away from the cage for a considerable amount of time, while Chris Camozzi is coming off a submission victory over young up-and-coming fighter Dustin Jacoby. And this is an interesting fight. You've got Catone, who certainly is a wrestler. He's NCAA Division I. He's a BJJ brown belt as well, which helps him out on the mat. His cardio is a little questionable, but this guy certainly is capable of holding his own. Not that long ago, he had a split decision fight with Mark Munoz, who's now one of the top fighters in the middleweight division. Now, you look at Chris Camozzi, and the big number that stands out to me is 44%, which is his takedown defense, which means his opponents are able to take him down more than half the times of their attempts. Now, looking at Catone, he averages a lot of takedowns per fight, and almost 6 per fight, which means he's going to put Camozzi on his back at least 3 times in this matchup if it goes the distance. Now, Camozzi's a BJJ purple belt, so he should be able to hold his own if he gets put on his back. But holding your own and winning the fight are 2 entirely different things. Camozzi has a lot of heart. He's very capable. But the big thing with me against Catone is how long will Camozzi be able to, keep this fight in a position that he stands a chance of winning against Francis Carmont. Camozzi had a heck of a time dealing with Carmont's pressure and couldn't really get him off long enough to unload any offense. And I think what this fight comes down to, now Catone being away for so long, that's certainly a concern, but I'm going to take Nick Catone to defeat Chris Camozzi by decision using his wrestling. We're now back in the 170-pound division, and we've got the first of a couple very interesting fights. We are looking at Rick Story, UFC veteran, 13-5-0, taking on UFC newcomer Brock the Machine Jardine, 9-1-0. I believe no relation to Keith Jardine, but I'll have to check that. Now, looking at Story, he's lost back-to-back fights. He got derailed after a huge win for Thiago Alves. He got shut down by Charlie Brenneman, and then he lost a decision as well to Martin Kampmann, which certainly set him back. So he's definitely desperate coming into this fight. Well, Brock Jardine has won 3 in a row. He's not, as I said, he's only lost 1 fight in his 10-fight career, and that lone fight was against Ultimate Fighter winner Tony Ferguson. Ferguson knocked him out midway through the 4th round in a very entertaining back and forth matchup. Now, looking at this fight, Brock Jardine, for the most part, he comes in. He's got some decent wrestling. He has a background of both high school and college. He's got a good top game, and he will certainly try to improve his position once he gets on top. He has decent striking. It's certainly improving, and he has KO power in his right hand. 4 wins by sub overall, 3 by knockout. He trains with Ramsey and Nijem, so certainly Ramsey will have given him as much insight as possible in getting ready for this fight and what the UFC experience is going to be like. Now, Rick Story, we're very familiar with Story. He has power, he attacks and flurries. He's very successful. We saw against Thiago Alves when he backs his opponent into the cage and starts unloading bombs. He had success against Kampmann earlier with that. He just could not continue through. Now, one issue he does have is if an opponent can take him down, like we saw with Charlie Brenneman, like we saw in the later stages against Kampmann, he has trouble fighting off his back, and he certainly can be frustrated in that sense. But as I said, Story should be desperate for a win, and he's fought better wrestlers overall. Like he defeated Johnny Hendricks, which is not an easy thing to do, as we've seen of late. And I think he's going to be able to take advantage of Brock Jardine, who's making his debut, less experience. Rick Story's a powerful guy. He's back on track. And I'm going to take Rick Story to defeat Brock Jardine by decision. In the 145-pound weight class, we have another young up-and-coming fighter stepping up to make his UFC debut as a result of an injury, as the Raging Warrior, undefeated Joey Gambino, he's 9-0, takes on Super Steven Siler, 29-0, Ultimate Fighter alumni, and I said 20 wins, 9 losses, and 0 draws, not 29-0. That would be an impressive record. Now, taking a look at Siler, he's coming off a very big win over UFC veteran Cole Miller. After he defeated Mika Miller, of course, Cole Miller, that's Mika Miller's younger brother. Cole Miller decided to drop down from lightweight to take a shot at the featherweight division. He took on Steven Siler, and Siler put an excellent effort together and surprised a lot of people, defeating Cole Miller. Prior to that, he picked up a win over Josh Clopton, so he's won 2 in a row. On the other side of things, Joey Gambino has won, as he's not defeated. He's won 9 straight fights. He's coming off a decision win over Kenny Foster in the main event of his last matchup. Now, looking at, for those of you who aren't familiar with Gambino, he's a TriStar product, so he's training with Rory McDonald and Rick Hahn and George St. Pierre, all those beasts over at TriStar in Montreal. 3 wins by KO, 5 wins by submission. He is a finisher. He's also a grinder. He's got good striking power, but he's got very solid ground and pound. He's got a high school wrestling background. He went right into MMA. He didn't go to college, and he certainly is dangerous if he gets on top and he starts dropping bombs. And he has excellent conditioning, which is certainly an asset to have in any sport. Now, Steven Siler is very impressive against Cole Miller. He has excellent clinch work. He's a very tall fighter and uses that height and that length very well. And I won't be surprised if he locks Gambino in the clinch and starts to deliver some knees and short elbow strikes if possible. Big concern for Steven Siler. Overall, his 9 defeats, 4 losses by knockout, 5 by submission. So he is vulnerable to being finished. And against Gambino, a guy who finishes fights, that's huge. Siler does have 12 wins by sub, and he's got a lot of heart as well. If he can't get his opponent down, you have to look at that situation. Now, in the previous fight, I felt Brock Jardine was going to suffer because of the octagon jitters. I don't think that's going to be the case with Joey Gambino. He just seems like the type of guy. He's an animal, and training with guys like George St. Pierre and the rest of the guys at TriStar and with Faraz Sahabi, getting him ready, I think he'll be more prepared for this fight. I think it's going to be an excellent matchup. This is definitely one I would tune in to see on the prelims. I think it's going to be a bloody, brutal war. And I'm actually going to take Joey Gambino to get on Steven Siler, use his wrestling, and pound on him, and eventually break him down. So I'm going to take Joey Gambino by TKO over Steven Siler. Now we're in the 155-pound division. As Ultimate Fighter finalist Ramsey Nijem, 16-0, takes on another debuting fighter in undefeated 8-0 CJ Keith. Quickly taking a look at Nijem, as we're very familiar with him, as it said, he's the Ultimate Fighter finalist. He was knocked out by Tony Ferguson near the end of the first round of their fight, but has rebounded since, winning a 3-round dominant decision over Danny Downs at UFC 137. CJ Keith, on the other hand, undefeated. He has 3 wins by knockout, a pair by submission, and 3 wins by decision. Now, we know Nijem's a wrestler. He's an average striker overall. He does have submission skills. I'd say striking is probably the weakest part of his game. He's certainly improving. He's a young, talented guy, and I'm sure his striking is going to get better. When he is able to get, like you saw against Danny Downs, we saw on the show repeatedly, when he's able to get on top of an opponent, he's very difficult to shake off. He gets on top, he grinds guys out, he looks for submissions, he beats them up, and that's how he had so much success on the show. But against Tony Ferguson, when he wasn't able to implement that game, he really struggled. Now, looking at Keith, as I said, we don't know a lot about him. He's a striker, and he's a wrestler. He does both very well. He's been wrestling since he was 8 years old, which is very interesting. He has big-time takedowns. I've seen a lot of footage of this guy. He has some serious power in his takedowns. And one very interesting thing, he has some very good sweeps off his back. I saw a number of times where guys were able to actually get on top of him briefly, whether he went for a submission and couldn't get it. But in that situation, he was able to just use his power and reverse the position and put himself on top. Now, I don't know if he'll be able to do that against Ramsey Nijem, but it'll be very interesting to see how these guys match up in the wrestling department. Now, the big thing I look at is this guy has some serious power. If you check him out on YouTube, he has a brutal flying knee knockout, which is certainly, he looks dangerous, and he throws some serious head kicks. He'll have to be careful there not to put himself in a position to get taken down. But overall, if the wrestling cancels out, I really like CJ Keith's striking ability to get the better of Ramsey Nijem. He's a slightly bigger fighter. He might have a little bit of a reach advantage. We'll have to find that out when the fight starts. But in this matchup, I like CJ Keith. He's debuting. Hopefully he doesn't have any octagon jitters. So I'm going to take CJ Keith to defeat Ramsey Nijem. I'm going to take him to win this fight by either TKO or knockout. Either he stops him with one shot, or he clips him, hurts him, and finishes him on the ground. Watch out for CJ Keith, folks. Could be a very interesting fight here and a very interesting prospect. Now, in the final preliminary fight, again, we are fighting at the 145-pound weight class as Ricardo the Bully Lamas, 11-2-0, battles 26-4-2 Hatsu Hioki. And it's kind of disappointing this fight's in the prelims, as I feel Hioki, depending on, it varies for certain people, but he's definitely in the top 5 contenders in the division. And I have Lamas, in my rankings anyway, I don't know if I have him quite in the top 10, but he's certainly on the cusp of being a top 10 challenger in the UFC's featherweight division. So I don't know why this is on the prelims, but I guess it's because Hioki, they don't find these guys are as marketable. But how do you market them if you don't get them out there so people can see what they're capable of? Now looking at Ricardo Lamas, he's coming off back-to-back wins since starting his UFC career. He defeated Matt Grice by TKO head kick, and then he submitted solid veteran Cub Swanson. So the guy's doing very well. Overall, he has 3 wins by knockout, 3 by submission, 5 by decision. He has been knocked out twice in his career for his lone 2 losses. Hatsu Hioki, on the other hand, back-to-back UFC wins to get going. He had a split decision win at UFC 137 in his debut against George Roop, and then a dominant decision win in his home country of Japan at UFC 144 over another very good veteran in Bart Palashevsky. Now, biggest thing that looms over this fight is which Hioki are we going to get? Are we going to get the one that fought George Roop in his debut? That was a split decision. It was a very close fight. Are we going to get the one that fought at UFC 144 against Palashevsky, who dominated him with his grappling and looked good start to finish? Now, the big question is, we've all talked about it, and of course Phil Baroni mentioned it, the trip from Japan to North America seems to really bother fighters, and that was the case for Hioki's first fight, but Palashevsky had to come to Hioki for a second fight, and potentially it was noticeable. So if Hioki has issues, will Lamas be able to capitalize on this? Now, Hioki comes in as a significant favorite in this fight, but I don't think you want to sleep on Ricardo Lamas. The guy's a Division III All-American wrestler, so he certainly has capabilities on the ground. He has knockout power, as we saw against Matt Grice, and of submission capabilities against Cub Swanson. But in that fight against Swanson, he actually had a lot of trouble with Cub on the mat. Cub's a black belt in his own right and very capable. Cub almost caught him a guillotine, tied him up in knots, and that certainly was an issue. And against Hatsu Hioki, who has some excellent trips and throws, he's got those very long limbs, he's going to have a height reach advantage, and if he's able to get Lamas to the ground, which I expect he will be able to, he should be able to tie Lamas up, threaten with submissions, beat him up with some ground and pound, and even if he can't finish him, certainly frustrate and do some damage against him. On the feet, Hioki's, again, 5'11". He has a reach advantage. He has a height advantage, which helps him to maintain distance. He's not a fantastic striker, but he's certainly a capable striker. He does a nice job with his leg kicks. He uses straight punches to keep guys at distance, keep him at the end of his jab. And, I think he's capable of holding his own on the feet with Ricardo Lamas, possibly winning the fight there. But Bart Palashevsky did have some success when he was able to attack Hioki. But again, fighters who are concerned about being taken down, they might be good strikers, but as soon as that concern starts creeping in, their striking suffers, and I think that's what's going to happen here with Ricardo Lamas. I looked at this fight as hard as I possibly could to try and figure out where Lamas has the ability to win this fight. I think he's going to catch Hioki. Unfortunately for him, Hioki has an ironclad chin. He's never been knocked out. All 4 of his losses have come by decision, and I think as long as the jet lag does not bother Hioki coming over from Japan across the big water, I'm going to take Hatsu Hioki to defeat Ricardo Lamas by decision. We are staying in the UFC's 145-pound division, but we are making the jump to the main card. And this is the fight I thought could have been switched with the Hioki-Lamas fight, but again, I think it comes down to Ross Pearson's marketability and familiarity with UFC fans, and that is Ross Pearson, the real deal Ross Pearson, Ultimate Fighter champion, 15-5-0. He was successful defeating Junior Sunsao in his featherweight debut. He's taking on WEC veteran Cub Swanson, 16-5-0, who's coming off an impressive knockout victory over George Roop. Prior to that, he was submitted in his UFC debut against Ricardo Lamas. Now, looking at how these two guys stack up, Cub Swanson's a BJJ black belt. He's a Greg Jackson fighter. He has 5 wins by knockout, 7 by submission, 4 by decision. Ross Pearson, on the other hand, he comes in, he's got 3 wins by knockout, 5 by submission, 5 by decision. Very interesting how these guys match up. I give Pearson a slight edge in the striking department, but I think this is going to be more of a brawl, if anything. Both these guys are going to come forward and they're going to throw down, and I think it should be a very good scrap. Another Fight of the Night candidate here. Do not miss this matchup, and it should be entertaining either way. Now, Pearson, I feel he's been doing a nice job to incorporate some grappling, but that would not be in his best interest here to say Cub Swanson's a BJJ black belt. He had an excellent throw against Roop, and as I said before against Ricardo Lamas, he did a lot of damage against Lamas, or at least threatened off on a number of occasions with his grappling, almost got him with a guillotine early in that fight, and I think Cub Swanson will give Ross Pearson some trouble on the mat. Now, on the other hand side of things, Pearson's got a 79% takedown defense, which is impressive. Against Junior Sunsao, he struggled a little bit early, but he forced Sunsao to work very hard to get some takedowns. When Sunsao did manage to get a takedown or two, Pearson popped right back up like a jackrabbit, and Sunsao basically did nothing on the mat to Pearson that was of any relevance. Overall, Pearson lands slightly more strikes at 4.2 to 3.19 against Cub, but over 15-minute fight, that's going to be negligible, especially if they brawl it out. I've gone back and forth on how I think this fight is going to go down. I think on the feet, these guys, I said, match up very well. Both brawl, both aggressive, and I like Cub Swanson's grappling. So I like to pick guys, when I do predictions, I like to pick the guy who has slightly more levels to his game. I think Pearson might be able to defend the takedowns, but I think if Cub can use any form of grappling and get an advantage in on any level and take him down for any period of time, I think that's going to be the difference. And they're going to look at that in a fairly evenly matched grappling matchup, and I'm going to take Cub Swanson to pull off what could be a minor upset and defeat Ross Pearson. I'm taking a lot of decisions, but I'm going to take Cub Swanson to defeat Ross Pearson by decision, possibly split. It will be tight, folks, but I'm taking Cub Swanson. Back in the 170-pound division is the always entertaining master of the Harrow, Brian Bad Boy Ebersole. 49-14-1 with 1 no contest battles. Dangerous submission fighter TJ Waldburger, 15-6-0. Ebersole is on an impressive roll. The guy has won he's won 9 fights in a row overall, which is nothing to sneeze at when looking at the competition he's taken on. Some big names in that situation. Since joining the UFC, wins over Chris Lytle, Dennis Hallman, and Claude Patrick. The Claude Patrick won a split decision. Either way, it was a tight fight, and Ebersole got the nod. TJ Waldburger, on the other hand, coming off back-to-back submission victories over Mike Stumpf and Jake Hesh, both impressive. Now, there's 2 big numbers standing out when I look at these 2 fighters. On one side of things, you have TJ Waldburger. He's fought 21 times. He has been knocked out 5 times, including once by Johnny Hendricks, and he also got stopped by Ricardo Lamas, who's fighting on the preliminaries. Brian Ebersole, on the other hand, overall in his career, he has been submitted 9 times, but he hasn't been submitted in a long time. And we've seen in his UFC career, he has some very impressive submission defense. In his 3 fights, 9 submission attempts have been thrown his way. He's avoided them all. Dennis Hallman went right after him early. He just shrugged it off and took advantage of that and stopped Dennis Hallman. Chris Lytle had success early, but again, went for submissions. Ebersole, just a calm, relaxed, very interesting, intriguing guy. Sometimes throws his opponents off, but he's able to, endure Chris Little's early storm and eventually get the better of him, and did some serious damage with his elbows. And of course, that cartwheel kick, I'm hoping to see something significant happen with that at some point. What a highlight that would be. Now, one thing I look at with Ebersole is that he's the type of guy, as I said, he usually gets locked in submissions, which is a dangerous thing against TJ Waldburger. Against Jake Hesh, he slapped that submission on and finished it with a brutal armbar, and you do not want to give Wahlburger an opportunity to get a hold of it a limb. He's got 12 wins by submission, which is very, very impressive. The average is 7.02 takedowns per 15-minute fight, 7.02 subs per fight, and that's usually because his fights do not last that long. His last 2 fights, he submitted Stump in 3 minutes, 52 seconds, submitted Hesh in only 55 seconds. He's very aggressive when he goes after his submissions, which is very good. He's a brown belt in BJJ. Ebersole counters. He's an NCAA Division I wrestler. And the way I look at this here, Ebersole does a nice job of enduring submission attempts by his opponents, and once that submission opportunity passes by, he capitalizes on the position he has gained as a result of his opponent making himself vulnerable, chasing the submission. And the elbows he dropped against Dennis Hallman, very impressive. And he's going to need to be careful against TJ Waldburger, but I really like the way Brian Ebersole's come a long way. And the guy's just a cool dude. I was on ShareDog and people were complaining about this matchup, and Brian Ebersole himself came on and posted about explaining why he felt this was a legitimate matchup against Wahlburger, and he wasn't taking a step back, and this is where he should be. I think if he wins here, especially in impressive fashion, he gets a step up in competition, takes on a top 10 guy, maybe a guy like John Finch. That would be very interesting. Either way, I think Wahlburger goes for submissions early, and I think Ebersole endures the early storm, gets the better of him with his striking, and eventually Ebersole catches him. So I'm going to take Brian Ebersole to defeat TJ Waldburger by TKO. Co-main event of the evening is in the UFC's 155-pound division, and it is a trilogy matchup as Sam, Hands of Stone, Stout, 18-7-1, takes on Spencer the King Fisher, 25-8-0. These guys have fought twice before. It was quite a while ago. They're 1-1, each guy picking up a victory. You look at Sam Stout, he's coming off a unanimous decision loss against Thiago Rivera. Very controversial. Prior to that, he won back-to-back fights, split decision over Paul Taylor, and then a knockout victory over Eve Edwards, his first stoppage victory in the UFC. Spencer Fisher really falling on hard times of late. He has lost 4 of his last 5, dropping fights against Joe Stevenson and Dennis Seaver. Then he turned around and defeated Kurt Warburton by decision loss against Ross Pearson, and then he got stopped by Thiago Tavares. So both these guys coming off losses against Thiago Tavares. Now, the way I look at this fight, in their first 2 matchups, exciting matchups, certainly fights you want to go back and watch. You've never seen them. Good both ways. Spencer Fisher's conditioning cost him in the Sam Stout loss. That's one thing. Sam Stout has conditioning to go for ages. Overall, I think Spencer has the advantage on the ground. He has 9 wins by submission. That's certainly, if he can get the fight there, that's an advantage for him. But Sam Stout is a very difficult guy to take down and put on his back. Sam Stout has excellent takedown defense. We saw that against Thiago Tavares. And when he gets taken down, his opponent has to work very hard to keep him there. Doesn't have a lot of offense. Eventually, as the fight progresses on, guys that fight Sam Stout have a tendency to get tired and exhaust themselves chasing the takedown, and that gives Sammy an opportunity to take the fight over. Looking at the numbers, Sam Stout's takedown defense, very impressive, 76%. Well, Spencer Fisher's takedown accuracy, 31%. So needless to say, I don't see Stout shooting for takedowns. This fight's going to spend the majority of the time on the feet, and in that scenario, I favor hands of Sohn Sammy Stout, simply because Sam Stout's a very technical fighter. He has the ability to just throw technique, and it really gives guys difficulty. Spencer, he's a very capable striker. He's going to need to mix things up and basically brawl the boxer, but I like Sam Stout's combinations and the way he throws his hands. Now, in his last fight against Thiago Tavares, he just seemed to lack that killer instinct. He hurt Tavares late in that fight. He just, in the second and third round, after he established the fact that Tavares could not take him down, he needed to be more aggressive and push the fact that he was the better striker in that matchup. And I think that's what cost him, even though I think he actually won that fight, or at least deserved a split decision. Some judge should have given it to him. Either way, we've seen worse judging decisions lately. Now, the big thing that stands out to me in this matchup, Sam Stout, 28 years old, very much in the prime of his career. Spencer Fisher is 36 and not in the prime of his career. He's had a long career, 32 fights overall, and I think it's starting to take his toll. The first 2 fights, Stout was young and inexperienced. Fisher was the veteran in the prime, and I think that's what's going to show up here. I think Sam Stout's going to be able to outpoint and outstrike Spencer Fisher early, and as the fight wears on, and Fisher's cardio starts to fail, I think Sam Stout pours it on, and I think there's a little bit of a slump going on at the Adrenaline Training Center since the loss of Sean Tompkins, which was incredibly unfortunate, and I think Sam Stout's going to snap out of that, his slump there. He's going to show that killer instinct I think he lacked against Thiago Tavares, and I think Sam Stout's actually going to pick up a TKO victory over Spencer Fisher, defeating him late in that fight, so I'm going to take Sam Stout to defeat Spencer Fisher by TKO. Finally, we move to the main event of the evening in the 155-pound division, and a very important fight in the 155-pound title picture as Gray the Bully Maynard, 11-1-1 with 1 no contest, takes on Clay the Carpenter Guida, 29-9-0. Very interesting to see Maynard in a fight that doesn't involve Frankie Edgar at this point in time. He has his last 2 matchups against Edgar, as we know, a draw, and then a shocking TKO defeat in the 4th round of his second fight. Clay Guida has been chasing the opportunity where Maynard hasn't quite been able to get it. A second opportunity to get a title shot. The first time against Diego Sanchez he lost. Then he went a very interesting 3-round fight against Ben Henderson. Very exciting fight, and he lost that one. Now Henderson's the champion. Clay Guida definitely wants his opportunity to fight the champ. Both these guys are predominantly wrestlers. Both very powerful guys. They attempt a lot of takedowns per fight. Clay Guida 4.27 per fight. Maynard not quite as many at 2.91. They're both very strong guys, and they have the ability to put their opponent on the back and beat him up and hold him and frustrate guys with their strength. Head-to-head, Guida's far more of a brawler. I think Gray Maynard's hands have improved significantly. We saw the damage he was capable of doing against Frankie Edgar. So I think I give Gray Maynard the overall advantage on the feet with his hands and with his ability, with his boxing, and his ability to hurt Clay Guida. Now, looking at their win-loss totals, 8 wins by decision by Gray, so his ability to finish isn't the greatest. He has 2 overall knockouts, and again, against Edgar, he showed knockout power, just could not finish. Now, of course, he suffered that knockout in that fight, and you have to wonder, how does he rebound from the first loss of his career, and that'll be very interesting to see in this fight. Clay Guida, on the other hand, 15 wins by submission, very talented there, but he's also been submitted 6 times. I really don't see Gray Maynard submitting him, considering Gray Maynard has absolutely no submission victories in his career overall. Big number in the wrestling department that stands out to me, Gray Maynard, 85% takedown defense, very impressive. Clay Guida's very good numbers as well, 68%. So overall, I struggle to see if Clay's going to be able to take Gray down. Clay pushes an impressive pace, and I think he has the cardio advantage, but I think Gray's going to be strong enough to withstand Clay's early pushes and use his hands to hurt Clay, or at least keep Clay backwards. Either way, very good. Now, keep in mind, this is a 5-round fight. Now, Clay has never gone 5 rounds before, but he certainly has the ability, and I don't think anybody doubts his ability and his conditioning and the fact that Clay will be able to go 5 rounds without a problem. Maynard has gone almost 5 rounds in each of his last 2 fights, the 5-round draw against Edgar, and then the almost going into just getting stopped at the end of the 4th round in the last fight. So his conditioning is a little bit questionable. He's a tough guy, but he's certainly slowed down in his last 2 fights. And again, Frankie Edgar pushes a heck of a tough pace on the feet. And, and Clay Guida pushes a good pace as well. But I think, overall, Clay might be an easier guy to take down. We saw Ben Henderson had success putting Clay down and beating him up on the mat again. It was very competitive. I like Gray Maynard in this fight. It's back and forth. It's going to be a tight fight. Never sleep on Clay Guida. He has the ability to beat anybody. But if you look over his career, the guys he's lost to are the guys he wasn't able to use his wrestling to blanket. Ben Henderson, Kenny Florian, Diego Sanchez, Tyson Griffin. These type of guys are able to deal with his wrestling and keep it from being Clay Guida on top for 5 rounds or 3 rounds, using his ability to control opponents for a victory. So overall, I like Gray Maynard's boxing to be the difference on the feet, and I like his takedown defense to keep Clay at bay, and I think Gray will end up on top in a number of scenarios. Don't get me wrong, Guida's probably going to get a few takedowns here and there, but he won't land them with nearly as much success as Gray Maynard will. Hopefully Maynard does not fade late. I don't see Clay knocking him out. I don't think he has the striking or the power to do that, but I think Gray should do enough in this fight to earn the victory. And again, I've taken a lot of decisions. I think it's a 5-round fight, and I'm going to take Gray Maynard to go the distance. I'll take Gray Maynard, defeat Clay Guida by decision, and put his name right back in contention for eventual title shot against the winner with maybe another. He needs another win at least to get back there, but I think this is a big step in the right direction. Either way, Gray Maynard, defeat Clay Guida by decision. So those are my predictions for UFC on FX4. We're going to keep this short. The bet pack will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net for $10. I will be doing a short show for UFC 147 eventually, talking about the fights I am predicting. Again, I said I will include those fights, the fights I do predict for that event, in the bet pack. Again, it's $10, but I've done I do a lot of work. I don't want to brag it up, but I do a lot of work and put some extra stuff in there. And I think I pulled off a number of upsets in the last fight, and I put some money in some people's pockets, so I certainly think it's still worthwhile. So please consider investing. Also, I have the forums now at the website. I'm not trying to take business away from any other website. I could never dream of that, but certainly I put some forums. I want to see some people hopefully discussing some MMA betting situations and betting opportunities and possibilities. So please sign up there. Again, thank you very much to all my sponsors, and thank you very much to all my listeners. I appreciate every single one of you, especially my longtime listeners. You know who you are. Thank you very much. And please check out Joel Richer and Joe Caporelli's predictions for UFC 147. These guys are doing a bang-up job, and Richer's been doing a lot of the event recaps and previews. Excellent job writing, really helping the website out. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll be back here very shortly posting my UFC 147 video, Kamikaze Overdrive MMA predictions. As always, please enjoy the fights.